So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Christian Pillett. I am the CEO of Transitive. Today we're going to be talking about creating valuable intelligence with your data. We've got a great panel here. We've got Evan, Bob, and John. I'll get into introductions in a bit. The meeting is going to be recorded, and also we encourage participation. There's a Q&A button at the top of the screen. So if you have any questions as we go through it, please ask them. We're going to go through a quick, John's encouraged me to race through. We're going to go through a quick 5-minute slideshow, 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll jump into open conversation. Anyways, thanks again for joining. The panel for today is myself, John Keene, who is the founder of ServiceMinder. I've known John for a number of years, highly respect him and what he's been able to do. Evan is the vice president at Streamline Brands. Evan has a ton of experience bringing together data for franchise systems and creating visualizations that are meaningful for franchisees. And Bob is the CEO of Central Bark. So Bob, thank you for being with us. So talking about data visualizations and why they're important, it plays a crucial role across organizations in communicating complex information and oftentimes communicating information to people who don't have experience in the data sets they're being asked to view. So data visualizations can be really important in driving success in franchises. So a couple of key things it does. It enhances comprehension, simplifies complexity. So oftentimes when you look at an Excel sheet, it's really hard to look at it and know exactly what it's saying. But when you create a line chart out of it, you can know exactly what the data is sharing. It can reveal different trends and patterns. A lot of people have seen, like Google Analytics, you can look at data year over year, month over month. And when you see the lines comparing to one another, you can see any anomalies in the data and see if there's any trend or pattern in there. And it really informs your decision making as a decision maker at a business. It lets you very quickly identify trends, spot opportunities, and address challenges. So poor example of data visualization is this. So this is crime statistics. And when you look at this data visualization, it's almost impossible to tell what it's trying to show. Things are not well marked. There are a bunch of bubbles. You can't really tell what's what. There's too much information, too many variables, and inconsistent scales or markers. So let's compare that to a good visualization. Here you can see, and this is from Central Bark. Thank you, Bob. Here you can see how reservations at Central Bark are trending over time. You can see they're up 6%. You can clearly see what the time period is and what the comparison period is, and it's visually appealing. So we're going to talk today about how to create those good visualizations. And within franchising, it's really important to provide a clear understanding to your franchisees about the data that they're looking at. Franchisees oftentimes are being asked to review data for the first time, so data is completely foreign to new franchise owners. Good data visualizations can help inform decisions. Oftentimes, franchisees have expertise in a certain function of business. So a franchisee may be great at sales, but never have experienced the financial aspects of business. And visualizing financial data in a way that they understand can make an impact on the franchisee's operations. And most importantly, I think that great visualizations create trust and transparency between the franchisors and the franchisees. Sharing of information, people buy into a franchise to buy into an operational playbook that works, a marketing, branding playbook that works, and they're buying into something that has a set of facts behind it and a playbook that should work. And providing franchisees with data that shows how they're doing versus that playbook and what's important makes it really easy for them to understand where to focus in their business. The last thing here is brands have a lot of options for different technologies to use to visualize data. Tableau, Domo, Google Data Studio, Click, Power BI are all very well-known business intelligence tools. And then selfishly, we've got Transitive on here because we're also a BI tool for franchises. And we make it really easy for franchises to disseminate information to franchisees in a way that they understand. All of the other tools are great tools, but they require a ton of customization, and they're just a little bit harder to use for franchises. So with that, I am going to pause. How did I do on time, John?
That's not bad. We could
That's
do it
5
again.
minutes.
I think we could do it faster, but
Next time. So I'll stop presenting. I'd love for the panelists to introduce themselves. John, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I'm John Keen. I usually refer to it as whatever's broken at ServiceMinder. It's my fault, and I apologize in advance. But luckily, we've built a really great team, so they've fixed all the ills of the early days. But yes, we're a platform for managing franchised home services brands. So if you think anybody business model where you call a guy to come fix a thing and pay him, and hopefully he comes back and shows up on time and all that, that's what ServiceMinder helps do. And we love data, like beyond belief. Data love.
Awesome. Evan.
Yeah, I'm the Vice President of Technology at Streamline Brands. We have recently gone through a data transformation on our side, and it's still ongoing, and I'll certainly talk about that in a little bit as well. But we are also very passionate about data here. We have a mandate as a franchisor. We're a franchisor of swim schools. We also own company-owned units. And our mandate for growth is to grow in both of those channels and also through mergers and acquisitions. So we've been using data pretty heavily in the last couple of years to inform those decisions, pick the most effective growth engine, et cetera.
Awesome. Evan, thank you for being here. And Bob. Bob, you're muted.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Bob Crawford, CEO of Central Bark. We're a leading pet services concept. We have 35 locations in 12 states. Our data journey is similar to Evan, ongoing. I think it always will be. We do love data. We actually love dogs as well, and of course, we love the franchise. We love the franchise business model in general. I think the most important thing, just to tee up on our journey, is getting the processes, getting the data clean first. The insight will come naturally. The hardest work, there's two hard parts of the hard work. One is getting the processes and the data clean. And the second thing, quite frankly, is not just kicking out data, but actually stopping and thinking and generating insight from it. So those are the learnings that we've had here as we embark on our journey. Thank you.
So Bob, I'll kick it right back to you. And I love that you're here. You've got such great corporate experience. I'd love for you to share some of your corporate background and the data that was available to you there. And then I think it was about a year and a half ago, you jumped into the franchise world. Mm-hmm. And I'd love for you to share your experience leveraging data and collecting data and franchising, and some of the first use cases that you're exploring with data.
Terrific. Yeah, so my background, I spent my first 16 years of my business life working in Fortune 100 companies. The Quaker Oats Company was one, and the Coca-Cola Company in Atlanta was another. So then I worked in a middle market company and joined Central Bark about almost, let's say, 16 months ago. My data journey background, big companies, data is just voluminous. It's all encompassing. It's available everywhere. There are pockets of, like Coca-Cola, for example, where data was not available, and it was kind of interesting. I had a manager once said, "Bob, the data's not here. Get over it." That was her direction to me. And I'm like, wow, what do I, but that was her way of saying, you know what, you're never going to have enough, no matter what. And that was true, even when you had voluminous data. It's never enough, right? You got to apply judgment. You got to apply decisiveness. But I think that doesn't stop me from wanting to get more data, for sure. So our data journey, like specifically with Transitive, has been around really providing our franchisees. We do generate a lot of data, right? So the question for us is, how do you provide information to the franchisees to encourage them, to strive for more, to share best practices and leaders. So I believe in rack and stack them. I think it's really important. Red, yellow, green is also another concept. It's really important. But how we present it, how we share best practices, how we celebrate success is huge. And you can't have that without fact-based data, right? You can say, yes, this person is best in class, but maybe they just are the teacher's pet, right? But when you have data, it all is about, there's inarguable, right? It's just, this is what the facts are. What are people doing? How are they executing? And then from that, you can generate the operational learnings and the how-to. And that's where the franchisor can really add value. It's that how-to. It's that playbook that Christian talked about. It's the operating routines and the best practices and principles that enables everybody to raise their game.
Yeah, and Bob, I think you specifically have done a phenomenal job with pricing in the first 3 months that we rolled out with you guys. Do you want to talk about what you did there and how you were able to drive some pricing impact?
Yeah, so I don't know if obviously we're in an inflationary environment, right? So and there's my experience in pricing is easy to talk about. When push comes to shove, sometimes it's harder to implement and execute. And so when with regard to pricing and with regard to, and that's all about margin enhancement for the franchisee, right? Of course, there's revenue for the franchisor, but margin enhancement is the big idea, and helping our franchisees become more successful and more profitable is our mission, right? So helping understand pricing is a big part of that, especially in being in an inflationary environment when costs are going up. So really, as it relates to specific pricing, so we have 6 different vertical or 6 different segment streams or vertical offerings that we have in our business. So we have 35 locations, 6 different revenue streams. So just 6 times 35 is a big number of pricing schemes that we have. And some of these verticals, like dog grooming, there is infinite numbers of choices with dog grooming. So the point of this is the pricing is when you actually compare prices across the markets, you're actually able to generate insight into, hey, this person is at $67, this person's at $40, this person's at $37, and that you can compare a much more easy across markets, and then you can actually encourage others to take the next step to adjust their prices to capture the value that they're creating. And data just helps to make that happen.
Yeah, and I won't. I think I was talking about trust and transparency across the network is created through data and sharing data with the network. But Bob's system was able to raise their average price 14% within 3 months of launching a tool which was transitive, but a tool that shared their data. And that's a really meaningful impact to the business and a meaningful impact to the franchisees. And I remember specifically being at your conference and sharing with the franchisee where their price was relative to the network. And they realized they were almost 30% below average. And they said to me, thank you. This is actually going to bring profitability into the business, and this is going to go straight to the bottom line. So that transparency of sharing average price and what it does can just have a meaningful impact to the franchisees. So, John, I'm going to skip to you next. So John and ServiceMinder, they serve 50 home service brands.
Yep.
And they're growing very quickly. And John has had the challenge of visualizing operational data and visualizing how franchisees really operate within their platform. I would love for you to share a little of that experience, some of the discovery you've gone through, and some of the results of what you guys show.
Yeah, I think, just to kind of point out some of the benefits of a franchise system is that, where else can you put 100 people who are in theory competing against each other on a common business concept, but yet they're willing to share data in a room, to kind of help grow the overall brand and process. So I think that makes, the problems we're trying to solve kind of unique in this space. One of the things I think we heard a lot early on and kind of felt from business owners, and as a business owner myself, right, is, a lot of times how you move forward is based on hunches, right? It's like, I think we should do this. I think we should do that. I have no idea why, but we're just going to go do that, right? And I think a big part of what we're trying to do is try to eliminate those hunches, right? Help you make decisions based on data, right? Not on hunches. For example, if your conversion rate is 30% and everybody else's is 60, then not only is that a hunch that you're not doing good at sales, but it's also the reality, right? And so that gives you specific concrete things that you can go focus on. So a big part of what we try to do is, give the data a way to speak to the owners and speak to the brand that they can use that to raise average prices or focus on locations that are knocking out of the park and figure out why with concrete decision-making processes. In terms of visualization, we're specializing in kind of the home services space. So again, kind of all of our customers, even though they range from, dealing with, pest control to kitchen remodeling to, landscape services, interior construction, whatever, ultimately they all kind of follow a similar process, right? Make the phone ring, send a guy or guys out to kind of figure out what you're going to do, maybe do it or schedule to come back and do it again, or keep coming and doing it until, the client says stop. And so all of those interactions all generate useful data. And so we've tried to standardize the kind of data that we capture in all those flows so that we can then show things that are actionable at the brand level. And in a way that makes sense, right? So conversion rate is kind of a conversion rate regardless of what you're selling, right? If you get so many leads and don't book them, right, that's money you paid for that you're not generating revenue from, and that's universal. And the ability to also do that on a geographic basis, right? Because we know where everybody's going, because the whole reason you call somebody to come do a thing is because you want them to come to your house and do the thing. And so you can layer all this data in to kind of help create more context for why and how to do these different activities from a decision-making process. The challenge then is, at a brand level, how do you do stuff now with all of that data in a way that adds context to the brand? So you mentioned Tableau, right? We have a Tableau offering for our customers, and we have a kind of a turnkey solution that lets them go at it. But that's kind of like, Excel Plus, right? It's like you have something highly specific that you want to go build and do. Tableau is a great tool for that. But you're basically kind of the blank page syndrome, right? You go file, new, okay, now what? Right? That's kind of what Tableau gives you as a starting point. The thing that's cool about the transitive offering is because of their specialization within kind of that franchise space and a lot of the metrics that are, again, similar and a good way to visualize that, they give a much better mechanism for being a good solution out of the box, right? So now you can kind of share those same visualizations across the brand, share the same data. And then I think also in terms of kind of that transparency piece you talked about, we try to implement the systems and processes to make sure the data is all consistent, right? If your data is based on stuff franchisees report, then you don't have good data, right? It needs to be based on people actually doing, actual work. And I think one of the things we've done fairly well is generating lots of data without having to go do a lot of stuff, right? If you just kind of run the process through the tool, we're going to generate useful data. All the franchisees are running all the same processes through the same tool. So now you have consistently captured data that's auditable and traceable back to the things that people really did. And now you can kind of focus on how do you want to see that and make decisions based on that. Ultimately the brand's responsibility and the owner's responsibility is to figure out, what decisions do I make based on having the data, but it all starts with consistent, repeatable, and visualizable data.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, John. ServiceMinder does a fantastic job of generating data as people move through their normal business flow. So where other systems may require a manual input, and other systems may have different schemas by locations, ServiceMinder does a great job of normalizing those schemas and also generating the data that allows it to be visualized and visualized in a way that people can make decisions off of it. So it's one of the reasons we love partnering with you guys.
Yeah, same.
Evan, switching over to you. I'd love for you to give your background, and I know you've actually been doing the data work at a very large franchise system. And now as part of YEB, you're part of an even larger organization, and it's compounding the data problems. I'd love for you to share the experience at Streamline and kind of where you guys are in your process and learnings from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Streamline Brands was recently acquired by a company called Youth Enrichment Brands, or YEB. And so what we were facing at Streamline, we're facing on a larger scale at YEB as well. Last year at Streamline Brands, we went from a homegrown software platform or an operational platform that we had built over a 10-year period to an off-the-shelf solution. So that was a huge change for us. It shifted our IT gears from focused on software development and really driving software development and trying to cater features and functionality to the folks using the software. It shifted that over to more digesting data and how do we most effectively use an off-the-shelf platform to run our business, but also without losing any insights from what we would have had before. With a homegrown software platform, we could do anything we wanted. We could put the data in any structure that we needed to put it in, and then digest it from there. But digesting it was always kind of an afterthought, right? The primary objective for us was to develop software as quickly and effectively as possible. So a distraction, to say the least. So that change to an off-the-shelf solution really opened a lot of doors for us, but it also posed a lot of challenges. So like I said, I don't know that I fully appreciated how much time it would take us to understand how the data was structured differently than our homegrown platform after we made that change. But the off-the-shelf solution that we went to did give us full access to our data in a database format or a data warehouse format. And so much of the last year, we've spent really just thoroughly understanding that format and archiving it in our own data warehouse solution. So like you said, Christian, we did have the resources allocated to kind of furnish our own data warehouse, understand our how the data was structured and how we were going to use it, and then apply that to how we were doing our KPIs at the franchisor level. Just at this, go ahead, Christian.
A quick question there. So I know you guys had the resources. Can you tell us about the team you had and how many people that was and what it looked like? And
yeah. So it was actually pretty skinny compared to what I think we would have otherwise needed. We moved fairly slow, which I thought was appropriate at the time. But we effectively had three folks tasked with various things, right? We had to understand the data schema, so we had to have an architect that would kind of create the data warehouse side of the equation. We had some analysts that were associated with or tasked with understanding the data and then at some point, hopefully visualizing it. And so it was there was a variety of technical resources associated with that as well. But it was quite the effort to just undergo that exercise alone. And now where we are is we're at a place where we have this data warehouse built with a subset of our data. Not all of it yet, just primarily from this one source. And now we're trying to decide where to go from here. I think, dissemination of that data is a huge question for us. How do we effectively get it in the hands of the franchisees? Everybody really loves Excel, and we're really tied to Excel through and through, but it's not the most effective way to do it. And so you could throw 30 bodies at that problem alone, and then you talk about disparate sources of data. I'd love to get our ERP system in there and our surveying system in there and our marketing system in there. And it's just
feed them into new tabs into your Excel sheet.
Yeah, just keep dumping out Excel tabs is kind of where we're at. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that, but I think that's a challenge that a lot of folks face, right? We spent a ton of time on the foundation. I really think we have a strong foundation to build on. But when we talk about dissemination of data and pulling in additional sources, those are additional skill sets. They're different resources than what we have today.
Now, Evan and Bob and John, feel free to jump in on this one. But I think when we were doing a pre-call, you talked about the different stakeholders that you needed to share data with. Do you want to talk about how you think about those roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's coincidentally very similar to the slide that you had put together there, Christian, where we're talking about different skill sets of the franchisees themselves. We have a diverse franchisee community. When we first started as a franchisor of swim schools, most of the folks that we attracted into that space were very dedicated to swimming. They wanted to extend their passion, continue to provide lessons to folks who weren't good at swimming, whether it be learn to swim or otherwise. And that was their focus, right? They wanted to open a swim school business because they wanted to make that difference and continue their passion. As we've matured as a franchisor, we still absolutely attract that type of franchisee, but we're also attracting more business-minded or data-focused franchisees as well. And so we have this subset of franchisees who say, I would love hourly data. I would love dumps of raw data, in whatever format you can get it to me. And I would, just furnish that however you guys can get it to me, essentially. And then there's another set that said, I don't have time to mess with that, right? I don't want to get into digesting data to that extent. I just want to roll up on a weekly basis or a monthly basis of how my business is performing related to other franchisees. And that's a challenge that we're trying to tackle. I don't have a good answer for that today. I think we're trying to do everything. And like I said, very Excel focused. So, that would be where a solution like a visualization tool would really come in handy.
Yeah, from a transitive point of view, the number of stakeholders that come into play at a franchise is really challenging because you've got franchisors, oftentimes franchise business coaches, you've got the franchise owners, you've got general managers, you have technicians, which, John, you may want to talk about some of the stuff you've done there. But you've got all of these different levels of the organization. Everyone has specific needs on what they need to see or what they want to see and how often they want to see stuff. And on top of that, you have to build a permissioning structure that allows, different people to see different things. So that's a challenge in and of itself. So I think franchising more than most businesses, because of all of the different levels, has to consider stakeholders and what they need more often than other businesses.
Yeah, I think people tend to underestimate the friction it takes to build a solution, right? So even in kind of the Excel model where we kind of joked on the pre-call about, if I've got an Excel spreadsheet with multiple tabs, I've got a data warehouse, right? But you've got to load all those tabs separately, they're all the different formats, right? And now you've basically got stakeholders and people who are feeding data in, they're manually downloading stuff, formatting, uploading, right? And it just becomes kind of ingrained into this is part of the brand's overhead to kind of produce the report we need. That, oh, by the way, is old by the time we look at it, right? Because it's now using data that came 30 days ago, and I think that gets underestimated in kind of the effort it takes to kind of eliminate that friction, right? But there's a lot of return on that because imagine you talk about your team that's involved in kind of designing the solution and helping to load the data in and understand it. What can those people do once that's all done, right? You want to get the return on those efforts and knowledge to go do other things rather than just turning the crank every month.
Yeah, and what's actionable can be different at each of those levels too, right, John? Like,
yep.
What somebody wants to see at the management level, to your point, Christian, is it could be very different than what the franchise owner wants to see. And so, it's a tough question to answer.
Bob, you're muted.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, there's a few things that I do every week, which is, report on how did the previous week same store sales go. That's a critical element to make sure you always have your finger on the pulse of the business. And then to the other point on major initiatives with the management team, right? So for example, part of what we do is of dog boarding, and our dog boarding is up like, let's say, double digits. But there's actually, which is great. So you want to do more of that, right? But there's really actually like three components of that. There's the number of people that are actually using your service. There's the number of days that they're actually using your service. If you go on a 3-day weekend, that's, versus a 4-day weekend, right? Or the third is the price per day or price per night. So just within that, as a management tool, each of those three components are actually operate independently of each other, and you have to have independent sort of strategies. Now, the number of days is probably the hardest one to move, but the other two there's a lot of opportunity to apply your marketing and sales strategies to impact those, and having data enables you to actually isolate and identify and prioritize your time against those.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And John, I want to get back to you actually. So I was a user of your platform.
I'm sorry. Just kidding.
As a franchisee before Transitive, and user of your platform, and I always found it really really amazing how easy you made it for techs to input information. Do you want to talk about your journey and how you think about building technology for those types of users and stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that's also kind of compares a little bit to Evan's background as well, and kind of the bespoke homegrown systems where you can literally just go hire a programmer or pay a programmer to kind of go build whatever it is that you want, right? And so we have customers who come from those kind of systems, and they have specific data needs that they have to deal with. And so part of our challenge was, how do we build a system that can be configured in such a way to capture the data they want without having to go build a new system every time we onboard a new brand, right? Because you can imagine the data you capture for a lawn care company is completely different than the data that's going to be captured for a kitchen cabinet, construction or remodeling type company. And so one of the things that we did is we built at the brand level a way to standardize kind of what we call the custom data, like custom field data, right? So you can throw custom fields on customers, you can throw them on appointments, you can throw them on proposals, all the way down to the proposal line level, right? Like if you're doing paint contracting, on each line, you can specify, hey, which room and which surface is this particular line of data for? And so for us at the core system, right, that's just all metadata to describe that particular brand. But because the brand can now standardize that data and can enforce the data that gets keyed into that, right? Is it a dropdown? Is it a number? Is it a date field? Now you can ensure that when that data is captured by all the franchisees, it all matches up and makes sense, right? If you're capturing, gallons of water that they're being used, right? If it's a drop down in a range, or if it's, somebody keys in, somebody says a lot or a little, a pinch or a dab, right? You can't do analytics on freeform text data like that way. And so by being able to kind of templatize that for the brand so that you can enforce the consistency, that then enables you to now do more stuff downstream with all that data.
Yeah. And before I go into the next question, if there are any questions from the audience, we do have the Q&A open, and we're happy to take questions through there. So on the topic of visualizing data, and this is more philosophical question, Evan, do you have any thoughts about how extensive the charts or graphs need to be for visualizing data for franchisees?
Yeah, so our approach to visualization so far has been pretty simple. We wanted to take the most basic of the metrics and throw it in a way that was easy to digest. So we turned to tools like Power BI and Tableau for those types of quick visualizations. What we found with that, though, going back to the resource question, was is a completely separate resource. Somebody that's exceptional at Power BI and Tableau, even between those two software platforms, might be completely different people. And so, so we kind of struggled with that, which kind of pointed us back to Excel for the time being, like I said. But yeah, absolutely. What we were capable of bootstrapping really quick in Power BI and Tableau were very basic charts. And then when you get to the franchisor level and you start looking at rolling averages over certain periods of time, then you want to benchmark that against other metrics. It starts to get very complicated. And so, like I said, a resource in that visualization can be critical, or finding the right tool, because we honestly might just not be using the right tool for that kind of thing.
Yeah. What you mentioned about resources, we've learned that there are people who are great at Domo, there are people who are great at Power BI, there are people who are great at Tableau. And like you said, oftentimes the person who knows Tableau does not know Power BI. And they're just very different systems. And we've also learned that people have strong preferences around which systems are used, which is really an interesting. It's interesting because of backgrounds people come from. But one of the things we've learned with visualizations is, I always say we try to keep our charts and graphs below like the 5th grade level, because in an elementary school, you learn bar graphs, line graphs, number cards, pie charts. And for the purpose of business, those things should, and for the purpose of franchising, those visualizations really do cover the majority of visualization needs. When we first launched our tool, we had some different types of charts and graphs that were a little complex, and we found the usage of those was really, really low.
Yeah, from a visualization perspective, I think it's important to keep in mind your end user, right? Your end user is not often the IT aficionado, right? They're not the person who's writing R or Python trying to visualize the data. They're the person who's trying to make it actionable, right? The franchisee or the franchisor or the management, and honestly, when we turn data over again in Excel to folks who digest it, they do some pretty interesting things with it, right? And so I think putting it in a format that is easily understood by the person actually consuming it sometimes gets lost. I know I've lost that in objectives before, and it's a really good point, Christian.
Yeah. Bob, I know you guys have started looking at our platform more, and can you share some of we talked for maybe an hour a few weeks ago about, hey, after we've gotten all this data in, now I can start setting goals towards certain things. Can you talk about how you've thought about operationalizing goals to data and data visualizations and the types of initiatives you might be able to grade people to now?
Yeah, so there's a few different areas where we're migrating to, and it's really it starts with setting the performance expectations in the franchise community, right? So we all want our franchisees to be successful, and it's up to them individually to internalize that. And what does that mean to them, right? It can be a whole host of things. I want to be a leader in my community. I want to pass something on to my children. I want to have I want to have multiple units. I want to be an absentee owner, whatever that is. But at the financial level, we have set some goals, some pretty achievable. But for some they're closer to them than others. It's about a financial performance. It's a annual unit revenue number, and it's a margin percentage number. And we believe that those are achievable and attainable as a system and as averages. So we set the bar sort of pretty high but it's not impossible, right? There's already people achieving at that level. So the art is like picking a number that people can aspire to, but not so high that people say, they're smoking whatever your thing of choice is, right? So, but it's aspirational, and I feel like we've done a good job. I've done this a number of years in a lot of different businesses. I feel like we've done a pretty good job at pegging to that kind of goal, and then after that it becomes what are the vehicles or the tactics or the initiatives that are building blocks that will enable a franchisee to achieve those. And so going forward, we've mentioned pricing before. That's a big part of this, right? There's another one, which is average dogs per day, right? That's another big one. And a small growth of 1 or 2 dogs a day on average has a multiplying effect on the business. And I've heard it when I was in the QSR business. We used to talk about it was a pennies business, right? It is a pennies business, and many of our franchisees have pennies or nickels that all add up when we're really successful. So when you set the bar high, and then you kind of set goals, and what I want to get to is, we mentioned pricing before. How do we, celebrate the folks that have been able to move on pricing? And dogs per day is another one. So these are, look, there's other metrics other than that are, I think, equally or that will be important, but those are the 2 foundational ones. But you have to set the bar and then really communicate out how are people doing on dogs per day, right?
Yeah.
What's the goal, and then what's the benchmark, what's the goal, what's the improvement, and then you do that enough times over the course of a year, then you get real breakthrough.
Yeah, and I know one of the things we talked about was we always share the network level average, and oftentimes it's a lot easier to improve the performance of people below average than it is to improve the top 5% of the network. Like the top 5% is always crushing it. Your guy in Brookhaven's going to do great no matter what. But the bottom half, it's a lot easier to make incremental improvements in the business. And I think your coaches showing those franchisees, hey, you're in this bottom percentage, and here's how you perform versus average. It encourages them to get to average, but what that also does is it raises the average. So, and in franchising, it's just about moving that number, right?
Yeah.
And I just to comment on that is I'm always going to be your dissatisfied CEO, even if you're in the top 5%. There is always opportunity. I mean, one of the things I learned at the Coca-Cola company when I was there for 10 years is there's always opportunity everywhere in the business, and you just got to use your creativity and your observational powers to understand. So even yes, there is always going to be a top 5%. I would suggest to the group here that there is a top 5%, and it can always be higher too. Thank you.
Get better.
Yeah.
Fair.
I think one of the challenges is to have the data and the norms at the brand level so that you can provide the franchisees with leverage that they can understand, that they can adjust to achieve those goals, right? Because it may be different for, every franchisee. One, it may be close rate. One, it may be, getting dogs to stay longer. Another one may be just raising prices. Another may be tweaking their marketing strategy so they can, get more leads at a lower cost from another source. And so by measuring those things, then and visualizing them as well, right? You can then expose the ability for them to kind of make some of those same choices. But I think it's also important within like you were talking about, the business coach, the franchise coaches, business advisors, kind of that whole role is critical in kind of the franchise model, because they're the ones who can kind of take that next higher level viewpoint of what other franchises are doing with the data they have and how to apply that to each franchise different use case, because they're all on different journeys and different stages in the process, whether you're at the 5% level at the top or the brand new guy who's hoping you make it to month 2. The things that they want to focus on can be guided well by those business coaches, because they've seen the benefits of it at a higher level, and helps you frame the conversation with the franchisee in terms of, like, I get it, there's a lot here. It's
Yep.
overwhelming. Your choices are available. Let's focus on this.
Yeah. With our tool, we always on our home screen, we always pull in anywhere from 4 to 12 metrics, and we call those the fit metrics or top metrics. And for each one of those, we show how that franchisee is performing versus the brand, and really we show, like, kind of gauge how they're doing on any of those metrics. And usually when we hear that a franchisee is struggling, or when someone comes to us and says a franchisee is having an issue, usually we'll look at the gauge and they'll be, call it in the 60th percentile for every metric. And then for one single metric, they'll be in like the 20th percentile. And that one thing is killing their business. So it's interesting that you can, if you're providing those averages and the comparisons, you can really visualize things in a way to show people their blind spots and show those franchisees exactly where to focus. Evan, I want to go back to you. I know we talked a long time ago about comparisons and sharing that with the network. Do you want to share how you guys think about it and what you're trying to show and against what metrics?
Yeah, so we, like I said earlier, we were trying to just start pretty simple. In our business, the primary driving metric is our enrollment. What we wanted to compare, what we wanted to start comparing across our franchisees and making that more publicly available was our enrollment between schools. And then, as we started to kind of mature and look more at other metrics, we looked heavily into pricing, much like Bob was saying. We saw some opportunities from a pricing perspective, but they weren't as numerous as we expected. Then we dove a little bit deeper into revenue, and we found that I think people are discounting more than they expect that they're discounting. And so, our list price might look just fine, but the number of times you give away a dollar or two here or there, that can start to add up. And so, I think it's those three areas or metrics that we would focus on, and we rank those internally today. But again, disseminating those to the franchisees and letting them know opportunities for growth is another challenge that we're about to face here.
I like how you dove into that as well.
Yeah.
The discounting is interesting. I feel like Bob is in agreement here. Bob, do you have an experience there?
Yes, discounting is the hidden it's the devil, hidden devil, in terms of I realize why discounting is available and why it happens is to bring new customers in, potentially to encourage trial, to meet a competitive need, and I understand that, period. It does, if left unmanaged, it does permeate your culture and your operating routines, and it hampers your margin. So I've just had a lot of experience in discounting and giving people a little bit of freedom and flexibility, which is important. And then sometimes I was smiling because I would say, oh yeah, this left unchecked and unmanaged, it can kind of create a whole life of its own that really hampers profitability.
Yeah. I think some people don't, I think it's an afterthought for some folks, right? Like, I'm charging the appropriate amount per class, and it can kind of get away from you over time, like you said, Bob.
So we've got maybe 12 minutes left. If there are any audience questions, would love to get those audience questions in. And if not, maybe we go to some final parting thoughts on data from the panelists. So Evan, we'll go back to you. Didn't see any questions come in.
That's because we've covered everything so well.
We've covered it perfectly. So I guess I'll pose it to you this way. You've spent probably 4.5, 5 years in this exact problem. If you could give our attendees advice on things to do first, things to focus on, and things to avoid, what would you say are your top things for those categories?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's been an ongoing project for us. There's no question about that. Like Bob had said, I think it realistically will never end. One of the things that we struggled with the most was making sure that there was uniformity in the data, and for us that meant that folks from an operational perspective were on multiple systems. We're tasked with growing through acquisition. A lot of the times the folks that we acquire are not on the same operational platforms that we're on. And so one of the first initiatives that we have to do and that we need to put some emphasis behind is getting them to the same platform, making that data uniform and being able to consume it across our entire system. So that problem, I think we've found good ways to overcome. Then when we turn to the data, like I said at the top of the call here, I don't think I fully appreciated how much time it would take to actually just warehouse the data and really understand the various sources. Because we've spent a lot of time, really focusing on one platform because that's what we've deemed the most valuable platform. But now we're at a point where people have gotten a little taste of what we can do with the data and what we can disseminate to folks. And we are getting request after request after request to get other data sources in there. And we just, we're excited to do those. And I think it's an exciting time for us, but it does take time to understand that. And so, we'll be looking for ways to do that faster moving forward.
That's awesome. So to synthesize that, avoid multiple systems at all costs.
Yes. Yeah.
Normalize to do first. Normalize the data and get data into a data warehouse, and a key learning is that data takes time. Data requires patience, and it can take years. So Bob, I'll ask you the same things to do first, things to avoid, and any key learnings for you.
Yeah, I said a lot. I think there's two things on this. First, it's sort of overwhelming sometimes when you start the journey, and I would just say to the group here, and I've got to remind myself after I say this too, is just try to get 1% better every day. All right, it's just just try to do that. Just get 1% better with how we use data every day, 1% stronger. So that's a mantra that I believe in. And the second thing is eat your own cooking. So what that means is it's one thing to talk about, yes, I believe in data, and then we as leaders are responsible for, living that, and people watch you. And so the question for me is how do I do that, and how do I lead? And that's super important. So thanks.
Absolutely. John, how about you?
I think I'm going to dovetail on what both Bob and Evan said. I think it's funny. So when we, as our part of a brand onboarding onto our platform, we kind of enforce all these consistencies, but it's something as common as lead source, right? You would think that like that would be so locked down and so easy to analyze from all your franchisees that you can compare marketing results across 50 locations. And I can't tell you how many times the data we bring in that's just a free source, type in whatever you want field, right? It's painful for franchisees to realize now they got to pick from a list because now they got to think about it. But, it's just, that's kind of the level of data that we're dealing with that's out there when people are kind of trying to bring that stuff in. The other thing that Bob said, which I thought was funny, is get 1% better every day. We have a different saying here at ServiceMinder. We say make ServiceMinder suck less every day. And so if you do that, so we've been around for almost 12 years now, right? So it sucked a lot back 12 years ago. It was way before Christian had got onto our platform, So if you keep working on making it suck less every single day, eventually it doesn't suck very much. So stick with it, keep iterating. What did you do today to make ServiceMinder suck less? So all about that. And we also eat our own dog food. So you mentioned, you said it nicer than I did, but in the software, we always talk about eating your own dog food. So ServiceMinder is a customer of ServiceMinder, right? We have an account, an organization inside ServiceMinder, just like all of our customers. We use it for scheduling our shows. All of our invoicing runs through there. Right? We're looking at that for stats and KPIs and all of that as well. So some of the KPIs we do are actually because I wanted to see them, with ServiceMinder data. So yeah, eat your own dog food and make it suck less.
That's great advice, John. That's something that we've talked about internally at Transitive a lot, is creating our own fit dashboard and creating our own top KPIs. Because yeah, if you use your tool, eat your own dog food, you'll know exactly what you're presenting. Yeah. We did have a question from Preston. The question was thoughts on visualizing process from an internal perspective and implementing KPIs within it. Evan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if I'm interpreting that correctly, we're talking about from a franchisor level or from a management of the franchisor level. So if I'm misinterpreting that, let me know. What we found is we do some things in visualization tools like Power BI and Tableau, and those are great at answering recurring questions. Where we can, our weekly enrollment is, the same chart every week. It's really, really easy to disseminate. So we do some visualization like that. And then what we found is that we've been answering a lot of ad hoc questions that those visualizations just don't even get remotely close to answering. Very specific targeted drill down questions. And in some cases, the visualization tool lets you drill down to that data in an acceptable manner. In other ways, we just have had needed to turn over raw data to the requester. So from a visualization perspective at the franchisor level, we've kind of drilled down to the KPIs we want to see, and we can throw those on a dashboard. But almost more informative in some cases are those requests that come in that say, I need to answer this very specific question, and I need you to answer it for me. So we've tried to turn over the raw data in those cases. So.
Yeah, and the process part of or visualizing franchisor process is interesting to us. We've had a lot of requests. Can we visualize the business coaching process? So a lot of franchisors will have learning management systems. A lot of franchisors will have onboarding tools and then expected actions every month. And it's interesting when we're tracking KPIs or visualizing the data for our clients. I'd say maybe 10 to 20% of the time now, it's actually tracking actions and visualizing those actions. So Preston, I think it's a really important thing. And I think that a lot of franchisors can improve on visualizing how their process is being followed. And it can even be, like Bob said at the beginning, green, yellow, red. Like, are you doing this action? Check, check, check. And could be a great way for franchisors to track the progress of franchisees. So
just real quick, just to deduct on that,
Go
what
ahead.
you're saying, one of the things that we have discovered is that, even in a tool like ServiceMinder can automate and kind of run lots of processes, franchisees can always find ways to just kind of skip stuff and do stuff or whatever, right? But when they get to the end and they're asking these questions about how do I do this or how do I do that, then it's like, well, you're not going to see useful data because you skipped this part of the process, or you didn't put this data in, or you're not capturing this from your customers. So let's start with doing that first. Then we'll come back in 3 months, and now we can have some real data to go and make actionable decisions on. It's important to kind of show the value of the data in the context of them making a decision, so they can see the value of training their people to follow the process to get the data.
Yeah. A lot of what we think about is time to value, and we're thinking more and more in terms of quick wins, and how can we even if it's not a complete data set, how can we visualize something quickly that even shows progress for getting to a good data set or getting to a good visualization? So I think tracking the process, regardless of business you're in, is really, really important. All right. With that, I just want to say thank you guys. Thank you, panelists, Evan, Bob, and John. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate the pre-work you did coming into this. Love the insights on here. I think we had a lot of great learnings that we'll share. And certainly couldn't have put this on without you. So thank you very, very, very much.
Yeah. Thanks for the effort to put this together. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah.
And from a transitive side, if you have any questions or want to contact us or the panelists, our contact information's up on the screen right now. We appreciate everyone joining and look forward to talking to everyone soon. Thank you all.
Yep. See you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.